They fined me $950 for non-compliance with a fence color that matched their own president's, then claimed authority to inspect my backyard by entry. They didn't expect that every inch of my property line was documented by deed, plat, and a survey filed 12 years before the HOA even existed. What they also didn't know was that I owned the easement they were standing on. Welcome to HOA Max. I'm Daniel Cross from Denton County, Texas. I design drainage systems for a living, which means I read maps the way most people read headlines. I tell these stories so folks like you don't get bulldozed by bad boards. If you're new here, subscribe so the next one finds you first, and tell me where you're watching from. It started on a Tuesday, 7:42 a.m., the sound of gravel under tires breaking the quiet. Two men in black polos marked compliance unit parked in front of my mailbox. Clipboards, mirrored shades, holsters I wasn't supposed to notice. They said the HOA had authorization to inspect suspected violations. I asked for the statute. They showed me laminated badges with no agency seal, just the HOA crest printed on glossy cardstock. I felt my stomach knot, but kept my tone flat. You're on a recorded line. I said, Texas is a one-party consent state. The taller one twitched. They walked the perimeter, snapping photos like paparazzi. I heard one mutter, "This'll teach him." My neighbor Ruth, retired teacher, arthritic but sharp, peeked through her curtain and mouthed, "You okay?" I nodded, but the tremor in my hand said otherwise. The HOA had been itching since I challenged their unauthorized special assessment last quarter, the one that failed to reach the 67% supermajority required by the bylaws. Knowledge nugget number one. Any HOA special assessment exceeding routine maintenance requires a 2/3 homeowner vote. Anything less is null. They ignored that. That afternoon, I found a notice of non-cooperation taped crookedly to my door, citing refusal to comply with inspection. It threatened $100 per day until full access granted. I scanned the QR code. It linked to a blank Google form. Amateur hour, but intimidation works when people cave early. I didn't. I emailed their counsel, CC'd the county compliance office, and attached a certified copy of my property plat, recorded under instrument hashtag 2009-18754, showing my fence exactly within limits. No response, only silence thick enough to taste like toner and cheap paper. By Thursday, HOA gossip threads lit up. Someone posted that I was harboring construction waste and endangering community values. The post had my address. At 9:13 p.m., headlights stopped outside again. Same black polos. One shouted, "Step outside now." My security cam caught it all. I called dispatch, voice steady, pulse sprinting. The dispatcher asked, "Do they have weapons?" I said, "They're acting like cops, but they're not." When Denton PD cruisers pulled up, red blue lights spilling across my lawn, the fake cops froze. Hands midair, unsure whether to bluff or bolt. Real officers disarmed them of airsoft replicas painted black. Turned out the HOA vice president had contracted them as security volunteers. PD cuffed them for impersonation and trespass. HOA's president claimed ignorance at midnight on the community app. A misunderstanding. But I'd already downloaded every message thread and filed incident report hashtag D23-0715. What they didn't know, what I hadn't told anyone yet, was that during my last job redesigning the subdivision storm drain, the developer owed me a fee that he paid in a strange way. He deeded me a 5-foot utility easement running the length of Maple Lane, recorded as parcel E112B. That strip sat directly under the HOA's decorative entrance sign and irrigation pump. I'd forgotten about it. Until now. At sunrise, I pulled the old binder from my filing cabinet. Rusty metal rings squeaked open. Inside, the original notarized easement, stamped in blue ink. If the HOA wanted to play property games, I could end their access to their own sign. But timing mattered. Let them dig their hole deeper first. The next day, a new letter arrived, certified, bold header. Demand for compliance, immediate. They cited Section 5.02 of the CC and RS, accusing me of hostile behavior and public embarrassment of officers. Fine, $950 due in 7 days. I smiled, slid the envelope into my exhibit folder, and whispered to paper, "You just paid for your own audit." My plan was revenge. It was cleanup, lawful, documented, final. I'd seen too many neighbors bullied into selling. I'd promised Ruth I'd fix what she called the rot under the pretty paint. Now I had the proof, the recordings, and the patience. The ticking clock began, 7 days on their demand letter. I marked each one on a calendar with a red Sharpie, counting not toward payment, but toward exposure. On day 2, I drafted an open records request to the HOA's insurer. On day 3, I booked a quiet meeting with a municipal attorney named Colleen Wu. Thermos coffee, ink smudged fingers, steady voice. She smiled when I showed her the binder. "Daniel," she said, "they built their castle on your ditch." By day 4, I'd filed notarized intent to restrict access to the easement pending liability review. No threats, no theatrics, just a form at the county clerk's office, stamped 10:11 a.m. I drove home with the copy seat belted beside me like gold. Ruth waved from her porch. "You're up to something good, aren't you?" "Not yet," I said, "but they'll know soon enough." The wind carried the faint hum of sprinklers, the same system drawing water through my easement pipe. Each click of the timer was money and leverage. I looked at the pump box, at the HOA sign above it, and thought of one line. Paper they forgot exists. Colleen's advice was simple. Don't swing until the camera is on and the clock's ticking. So I didn't. I just documented. Emails, notices, timestamps, recordings. Every contact routed through certified mail. Every form notarized. Every sentence ready to be read aloud to a judge if it came to that. The HOA thought silence meant surrender. In truth, it was incubation. Friday morning, 9:05 a.m., I saw the HOA president, Tom Barlow, at the end of Maple Lane. He was in his khaki uniform of self-importance, clipboard, Bluetooth headset, power walk. "We need to talk," he called. I said, "Put it in writing." He grinned like a man who'd never been told no. "You're isolating yourself, Daniel. That's not good optics for the community." I smiled thinly. Neither is impersonating police. His grin wilted, replaced by the flicker of panic he couldn't quite hide. At noon, an email arrived from communityrelations@mapalakehoa.org with a new attachment titled Mediation Proposal. It offered to waive half the fine if I signed a non-disclosure understanding about the security incident. Classic containment move. I replied with a single sentence. All matters are now subject to public record. Then I hit print, slid the page into my binder, and wrote Day 5 in red ink. By 3 p.m., Colleen had looped in a title examiner named Byron Holt, mid-50s, glasses smudged with dust, voice like creased paper. He verified the easement deed line by line. "See this clause?" he said, tracing with a pencil. "It grants you ingress and egress rights. Means they can't touch or maintain anything here without your written consent." He paused. "That irrigation pump? Their landscapers cross it weekly. You're their gatekeeper now." I nodded, the weight of the paper suddenly heavier than its grams. "Are you firmly anti-HOA? If you've ever had to push back on one, tell us how you did it, so the next person reading this doesn't have to learn the hard way. And if you haven't, leave a message below for the HOA officers scrolling through these comments." They read everything. That night, Ruth knocked softly on my door. "They came to my porch," she whispered, eyes wide behind her glasses. "Said I should reconsider signing your petition." I hadn't even mentioned a petition to anyone. That meant someone inside the HOA office was intercepting my open records requests and guessing my next move. I thanked her, gave her a copy of my attorney's card, and promised she'd never face them alone. By Sunday, the community message board locked my account. "Repeated dissemination of misinformation," it said. I took screenshots, all of them time-stamped. The smell of toner from my cheap printer filled the kitchen as I printed each one. Stack by stack, I built what Colleen called a paper Arkansas. She said it with a smile, but I could hear the steel underneath. Knowledge nugget number 2. Under most state statutes, HOA boards must maintain open access minutes and financial ledgers for inspection by any member within 5 business days of written request. Mine had been ignored for 11. That was my countdown timer. On day 12, I found a pink slip taped crookedly to my gate. Notice of intent to suspend amenities. I hadn't used a pool in years, but it was the principle. They'd crossed into retaliation territory. I slid the notice into a clear plastic sleeve, took a photo with my phone beside that morning's paper for date verification, and smiled. Ruth called me that evening. They're saying you're going to sue everyone. I said, only if they keep volunteering for it. She laughed softly, the sound like a reprieve from all the paper noise. The next morning, I drove to the county assessor's office. The clerk, a man named Jeffrey who smelled of coffee and copy toner, leaned over the counter. You're the engineer, right? The one with the drainage map? I nodded. He slid a microfilm envelope toward me. Old developer filing, 2008. Contains maintenance obligations. Might interest you. The film crinkled like secrets. Back home, I projected the scan image on my wall. A maintenance covenant binding the HOA to uphold all easement upkeep, subject to owner rights. Meaning, if the owner withdrew consent, the HOA was legally frozen from maintaining the irrigation. Their green lawns depended on my signature. That night, I set an alarm for 5 a.m. and wrote a draft. Notice a suspension of access for maintenance pending liability review. 10 lines, no adjectives, pure code. Tomorrow it would become real. My pen hovered over the signature line when headlights swept my window again. Same make of SUV, no markings, engine idling too long. I didn't move, just reached over and clicked my phone camera. Timestamp 11:48 p.m. Another entry for the ARC. The air smelled of damp asphalt, the kind that holds secrets. I knew I was past the point of irritation. This was a siege, slow, procedural, papered, but still a siege. And what they didn't realize was that I'd already set a trap inside their own bylaws. Somewhere in those 47 pages, there was a clause they'd forgotten existed. A clause that, when invoked by the easement holder, forced an emergency audit by the county inspector. I just needed the right witness when I used it. By dawn, the neighborhood looked ordinary, due on mailboxes, sprinklers ticking like clock hands, but I could feel the tension vibrating underneath. I brewed coffee, scanned my new draft again, and adjusted one sentence to cite section 8.04 of their own CC and RS. It was a line that required county verification before any utility modification or restriction. Exactly the kind of clause they'd buried and forgotten. I printed 2 copies, slipped one into a manila envelope labeled Exhibit F, and drove to City Hall. The clerk at the records window had seen my face too many times that week. Back again, Mr. Cross? She said, still fighting the good fight. Not fighting, I said, just maintaining accurate paperwork. On my way out, I saw a notice pinned to bulletin board. Annual HOA general meeting, 10 days. I photographed it. A countdown. 10 days until the moment everything would be public. Back home, my laptop pinged. A new message from an address ending in hoinsure.com. It was the association's insurance carrier acknowledging receipt of my liability inquiry. We have initiated an internal review, it read. 1 paragraph later, they asked for clarification on the scope of easement ownership. The hook was set. Insurance companies hate gray areas. I had just drawn one in ink. That night, I sat with Colleen and Byron at the diner across from the courthouse. She pushed aside a plate of fries and spread the documents across the table. You've got enough to trigger an audit, she said. But the real punch is timing. Let them claim full compliance before you show this. Byron adjusted his glasses. You sure you want to handle this yourself, Daniel? They'll smear you. I smiled. They already did. Might as well earn it. The smell of burnt coffee clung to the table. We all laughed once, quietly. Around midnight, a post appeared on the HOA feed from admin. Unauthorized tampering with irrigation system may result in civil liability. The timing told me they'd seen the easement filing, but bluffing was their only move left. I printed it, highlighted the phrase may result, and filed it under threats unfounded. Knowledge nugget number 3. Selective enforcement. penalizing one homeowner for a rule ignored for others, voids at rules enforceability. Half the board's fences violated their own standards. I had photos, coordinates, and measurements. The next evening, Ruth stopped by with a Tupperware banana bread. "They're nervous," she said, handing me the container. "Tom's wife told the book club you own the pipes." "She's not wrong," I said. "Then why do you look worried?" "Because scared people make dumb paperwork." At 6 a.m. the following morning, I found a bright orange tag on my mailbox. Pending lien review. They were escalating again. I called Colleen. "They can't lien you without due process," she said. "Let them send it. Every premature notice adds another violation." Later that afternoon, the hum of the irrigation pump stopped. Silence, just the hiss of wind through dry grass. They'd shut it off preemptively, hoping I'd panic when lawns browned. Instead, I checked my watch and noted the outage. 3:17 p.m. That silence would be my soundtrack at the meeting. As I walked the street, neighbors peeked from curtains. One whispered, "Are we losing water?" "Not yet," I said. "Just accountability." Debate time. Let me ask you, how far should an HOA control what happens on your property? Where's the line between maintaining standards and crossing the fence? That evening, I met my third ally, Elias, a retired municipal inspector who still carried his old clipboard like a badge. "You're the guy with the drainage map," he said. "I heard you made their pump go quiet." "Not yet," I said, "but they'll think I did." He chuckled. "I'll be at that meeting. Bring copies. They hate copies." For the first time in weeks, I slept. The ticking of my wall clock replaced the pounding in my head. 10 days had become 7, and every tick was louder now. Somewhere in the HOA office, they were rewriting memos, redacting minutes, thinking I'd run out of stamina. But the truth was simpler. I wasn't fighting to win. I was waiting to record them losing. The printer light blinked green again, another document sliding into the tray. The revised maintenance clause I drafted overnight. Each page smelled faintly of ozone and victory deferred. Outside, the sprinklers coughed once, sputtered, then stopped completely. The neighborhood would start asking questions by morning, and that was exactly the point. By the third dry morning, panic started to bloom like weeds. Lawns turned patchy, flower beds wilted, and the Maple Lake group chat was one long scrolled, "Is anyone else's water off? And this is unacceptable." I kept silent, sipping coffee while notifications piled up. It's strange watching a system that bullied you suddenly turn on itself. Tom Barlow, the president, posted at 8:12 a.m., "We are investigating a mechanical failure. Residents are advised not to tamper with HOA equipment." I replied only with a screenshot of the county's maintenance covenant, highlighted clause, time-stamped. The comments section exploded. Someone asked, "So who actually owns the pump?" Another wrote, "Wait, Daniel's an engineer, right?" And just like that, the question I'd been waiting for started to echo through digital walls louder than any sprinkler ever could. Elias called around noon. "The rumor mill's working overtime. They're blaming squirrels, hackers, you name it. You still holding your cards?" "Close to the chest," I said. "Let them choke on speculation." "Good," he said, "because they just scheduled an emergency board meeting tonight. Public session. 7 days early. Perfect. I arrive at the clubhouse at 6:58 p.m., binder in hand. The fluorescent lights buzz like insects, the air thick with that mix of carpet cleaner and fake civility. About 30 residents filled folding chairs, murmuring. Tom sat at the head of the table, face red from something more than sun. "Mr. Cross," he said through clenched teeth, "nice of you to join." "I wouldn't miss it," I said, and placed the binder on the table with a soft thud. The sound cut through the room like a gavel. He started with a speech about community unity and unfortunate misunderstandings. Then he pivoted to blame. "Due to interference by certain individuals, our irrigation access has been compromised." I raised my hand. "Point of order," I said. "You're referring to the parcel E112B easement?" His eyes flicked toward his secretary, unsure whether to deny or deflect. "That's HOA maintained property." "Incorrect," I said, sliding a document forward. File deed instrument hashtag 2009-18754. My property. Recorded before your HOA's existence. You've been trespassing for 12 years. Gasps from the crowd. Someone whispered, "Is that real?" I passed a notarized copy down the row. Tom's jaw twitched. This is highly irregular. So is hiring fake cops. I said evenly. A murmur rippled. Those were volunteers, he snapped. With replica weapons. That's a felony in Texas. He slammed his hand on the table. You can't come in here and threaten us with paperwork. I leaned forward. I don't threaten. I document. The room went quiet except for the sound of Elias's pen scratching notes. At that moment, I caught movement near the doorway. A police officer from Denton PD, uniform crisp, expression neutral. He nodded once toward me. My neutral authority was in place. I didn't plan it, but Colleen might have. She liked symmetry. Tom glanced nervously at the officer. Is there something we need to know? The officer said, Just observing, sir. There were prior complaints. That single sentence froze Tom's bluster. Midway through the meeting, I mentioned a word that made every board member shift uncomfortably. Audit. Your insurer initiated a liability review. I said, pulling out the email. They need verification of easement rights. You have 10 business days. Tom's hand trembled slightly as he fumbled his water bottle. We'll handle it internally. Not possible, I said. They're external by policy. The suspense in the room became physical. Tight air, shallow breaths, eyes darting between us. I could almost hear the clock ticking behind me, counting down to the inevitable. If you're reading this, where do you stand on HOA power? Should they hold that much control over what happens outside your door? Or does that control protect communities? Tell me below. Tom tried to pivot again. You're destabilizing this neighborhood. No, I said, I'm stabilizing the truth. You built on my land, used my water, fined me for your mistake, and pretended to be law enforcement. That's not stability. That's fraud with landscaping. Laughter broke the tension. A few claps followed. Tom's face flushed deeper crimson. He announced a short recess and stormed out. I watched him walk toward the pump enclosure through the clubhouse window. The officer followed at a distance. When Tom opened the maintenance box, he froze. The padlock was tagged with an official county seal. Colleen's doing again. I hadn't even known she'd filed a notice that morning. He turned back toward me through the glass, mouthing something I couldn't hear. Maybe it was anger, maybe disbelief. Either way, his empire of mulch and bylaws had just met a wall of notarized fact. And just as I stood to gather my papers, my phone buzzed with a text from Colleen. Don't leave yet. The best part's about to start. The officer walked back in first, his boots tapping out a slow rhythm on the tile. He spoke to the crowd, voice calm, official. For anyone wondering, the county confirmed earlier today that maintenance access to the Maple Lane irrigation pump is under legal review. Until that's resolved, no one, including HOA personnel, may enter that easement. He turned toward me. Mr. Cross, your filing's in order. The room filled with a ripple of whispers. Relief for some, panic for others. Tom returned a few seconds later, sweat glistening at his temples. This is harassment, he said, voice cracking. We have homeowners demanding service. We'll seek injunctions if we must. I slid one more sheet forward. Already anticipated that. I filed for declaratory judgment this morning. Docket numbers right there. The judge will love your definition of harassment, especially after those fake officers. His expression collapsed into something like disbelief. He didn't know whether to yell or laugh. You can't run a neighborhood on paperwork. Funny, I said. That's all you've ever run on. After meeting adjourned in chaos, Elias patted my shoulder. You gave them the paper cut that won't stop bleeding, he said. Ruth hugged me on the way out. You're giving people hope again, Daniel. Hope's fine, I said, but I'm aiming for precedent. Over the next week, retaliation came in waves. Anonymous letters, no return address, accused me of defaming community leadership. A code inspector appeared at my house 3 times in 5 days, each time with a different complaint. Trash invisibility, unapproved mailbox font, front light lumen variance. I photographed every notice, documented each visit. The 4th day, someone keyed my truck. Deep, deliberate scratches across the driver's door. I didn't call the police this time. I just took photos, attached them to an incident log, and added the insurance company as a CC. If you ever face HOA retaliation, document, don't react. Paper doesn't lose its temper. Midweek, Colleen called. They're folding faster than I expected. The insurer requested full board minutes from the last 2 years. That's going to expose a lot, I said. Exactly, she replied. And they know it. Late that night, Ruth's porch light flickered. I walked over, carrying 2 mugs of coffee. She was sitting in her rocking chair, robe wrapped tight. "You hear the news?" she asked. "What news?" Tom's vice president resigned. Said something about personal liability exposure. I smiled into the steam of my coffee. Domino won. But it wasn't over. The HOA doubled down on fines. 3 new notices in 2 days. The total now stood at $2,850. They knew it wouldn't hold up in court. It was psychological warfare. Still, I kept each envelope sealed, file by date unbroken. Proof that restraint could be louder than rage. Halfway through that week, the stress finally caught me. I woke at 3 a.m. with a familiar tightness in my chest, the hum of fear whispering. What if they still win? I sat at my desk, opened a binder, and ran my fingers over the embossed notary seal. Stay lawful, I whispered to myself. Stay patient. Tell me, if your HOA stacked citations against you out of spite, would you pay to end it or stand and fight? Drop it in the comments. Maybe your answer helps someone decide tonight. By Friday, I found my car under a new sticker, violation, unauthorized decal display. It was my veteran parking tag. They'd stooped that low. So I made a phone call to a reporter I'd met years ago on a flood control project. "You want a story about power abuse?" I asked. He chuckled. "HOA drama? That's small town gold. You got receipts." "Binder's full," I said, "and a county seal." He promised to send a photographer before the next board meeting. That gave me 3 days. I spent every hour cross-referencing their bylaws against county statutes, building what Colleen called a final lever. It was a 14-page compilation of every selective enforcement, conflict of interest, and open meeting violation they committed since incorporation. Saturday morning, I found Tom pacing outside the clubhouse. "You think you're some hero?" he hissed. "No," I said, "just an accountant of arrogance." "You're ruining this community." "Maybe," I said, "or maybe I'm finally auditing it." The next board meeting was scheduled for Monday, 6 p.m. I printed 30 bound copies of my report, each labeled transparency packet, community distribution. When the day came, I laid them on every chair before anyone arrived. The room smelled like fear and toner. And as the clock struck 6, the first flash from a camera outside the window told me the reporter had arrived. The flash through the window froze everyone for a second. Half the crowd turned their heads, startled by the sudden burst of light. Tom's jaw tightened when he saw the photographer step inside. "Press badge visible." "This is a private meeting," he snapped. "Not anymore," I said, calmly pulling a folded letter from my inside pocket. Open Meeting Statute, Section 209.005, one of the Texas Property Code. Any board session discussing fines or community infrastructure is open to members and the public. You violated that 3 times this month. So tonight we correct that. The reporter grinned. "Mind if I roll audio?" I shrugged. Texas is one-party consent. Roll away. Colleen had taught me that phrase like a prayer. The board tried to salvage composure. Minutes ticked by in paper rustles and nervous throat clears. Finally, Tom stood. "We're addressing a resident's ongoing interference with community systems." He began, voice wavering. His actions caused disruption, loss of irrigation, reputational harm. I interrupted. "Loss of irrigation due to your unauthorized use of a private easement, confirmed by county review. I flipped open a binder tab marked Utility Rights. Exhibit H. Elias, seated behind me, chuckled under his breath. The microphone caught it. I placed another page on the table, this one embossed official. Here's the county inspection order filed 48 hours ago. Until further notice, that pump is shut down for compliance testing. If anyone tampers with it, they'll face misdemeanor charges. Guess whose signature's on that request? I turned the page so Tom could read it. His lips parted, but no sound came. He tried again, voice trembling. You're weaponizing bureaucracy. No, I said, I'm following it. You just never thought someone else would. The audience started clapping, a few hesitant hands at first, then louder, until Tom shouted for order. The officer from last time stepped forward again. Palms up. Let's keep it civil, he said. His presence was the quiet hammer I needed, neutral, steady, undeniable. I leaned closer, voice low but carrying. Tom, I'm giving you 7 days. 7. Either you release the maintenance and audit records to the community, or I file for court-order receivership of the HOA. He blinked, uncomprehending. You can't do that. Check section 82.116 of your own declaration. Supermajority petition plus verified misconduct equals appointment of receiver. I already have 28 signatures. Gasped again. Someone whispered, that's more than half the neighborhood. Knowledge nugget number 4. Under many HOA statutes, homeowners can force leadership audits or even temporary receivership if a majority confirms financial misconduct or negligence. It's rare but real. Tom sank back into his chair. The sound of the plastic seat creaking filled the silence. From the doorway, the reporter raised his voice. Mr. Barlow, can we quote that you'll comply? Tom muttered something unintelligible. I'll take that as a maybe, the reporter said. The crowd laughed, tension finally cracking. After the meeting, Ruth touched my arm. You did it. Not yet, I said. They'll fight dirty before they fold. She nodded. Then we'll just keep sweeping up after them. Walking home under the sodium lights, I replayed everything in my head. The smell of cut grass, faint now that irrigation had stopped. The hum of cicadas hiding in hedges. The sound of that camera shutter, proof that truth had been captured in color. Still, I couldn't shake the unease. Tom wasn't the kind to surrender gracefully. He'd lost control, but men like him always tried one last move, something desperate. And sure enough, when I checked my email that night, there was cease and desist notice, defamation and tortious interference. Sent at 11:43 p.m., signed by an attorney I'd never heard of. I smiled. They were still playing checkers on a chessboard. I forwarded it to Colleen, adding only one line. Shall we invite their lawyer to the next meeting too? 5 minutes later, she replied, Better. Let's invite the state ombuds. My heart kicked once, sharp. The ombudsman was a state-level watchdog for HOA conduct, a neutral authority beyond any board or court. It meant the end game was closer than Tom realized. As I shut down my laptop, I whispered into the quiet, 7 days. 7 days until the dominoes hit the floor. By morning, the air itself seemed to hum with rumor. Someone had leaked the reporter's story draft. A headline sitting at the top of the local paper's homepage. Homeowner claims HOA overreach after fake police incident. It wasn't even live yet, just a preview image and caption. But it was enough. People slowed their cars when they passed my driveway. A couple of bored loyalists filmed my lawn, muttering about legal action. At 10:17 a.m., an email pinged from the state ombudsman's office. We have scheduled an on-site review and public compliance hearing for Monday, 9 a.m., at the Maple Lake Community Center. I stared at it, coffee halfway to my lips. That was 2 days before the HOA's own internal deadline. Perfect timing. I forwarded the message to Colleen, then to Elias and Ruth. Within minutes, Ruth replied with a single word. Finally! The weekend blurred into calls, printouts, and sleepless nights. My living room turned into a staging ground. Stacks of binders, highlighted statutes, photos taped to walls like some quiet crime investigation. Except every clue was lawful paper. The smell of toner clung to the air, sharp and electric. Sunday evening, Elias stopped by. He brought a fresh clipboard, the old inspector reflex never dying. "You nervous?" he asked. "More like steady," I said. "It's been steady for a while now." He looked around at the binders, then whistled low. "You built yourself an armory. Paper cuts bleed slower, but they bleed longer," I said. He laughed. "The morning of the hearing, I arrived early. The sun had barely burned through the mist, the asphalt still wet from sprinklers that hadn't quite remembered the ban. Inside the community center, rows of folding chairs filled with homeowners. A single-camera tripod sat in the corner, red light blinking. Live recording for the record. Tom entered last, flanked by 2 board members and the same new lawyer who'd emailed me. A woman with sharp features, bright lipstick, and a stack of binders thicker than mine. She looked competent and dangerous. The ombudsman, a tall man with calm eyes and a voice like gravel after rain, opened the session. "We're here to address allegations of unauthorized actions by the Maple Lake HOA Board, including impersonation, trespass, misuse of easements, and potential retaliation." He nodded toward me. "Mr. Cross, you filed initial complaints. You may proceed." I stood, my voice steady. "Yes, sir. The evidence package before you includes Exhibit A, survey plat recorded under instrument hashtag 2009-18754. Exhibit C, Denton PD Incident Report D23-0715. Exhibit F, County Maintenance Covenant. And Exhibit H, email from HOA insurer confirming liability review." The lawyer cut in. "Objection. These documents were procured without board consent." The ombudsman raised an eyebrow. "Public records don't require board consent." Her mouth closed like a slammed file drawer. I continued. "Additionally, I submit photographic evidence of selective enforcement. 18 properties in violation of fence color and mailbox code, none cited. And finally," I paused, holding the last sheet aloft, "a recording of the HOA vice president contracting unlicensed security officers in violation of Texas Occupations Code Section 1702. Gasps again, but this time heavier, like the air itself was exhaling secrets. Tom's face drained of color. He looked at the lawyer, who scribbled something furiously. The ombudsman leaned forward. "Is this recording verified?" "Yes, sir. One-party consent state. Date stamped and stored." He nodded. "Then it's admissible." That was the sound of the floor tilting beneath the HOA. "Tell me this. Should recordings of HOA meetings always be legal? Accountability or invasion? Where's the line?" As the evidence piled up, you could see the realization ripple through the audience. They weren't watching a fight anymore. They were watching a system fold. Then came the moment I'd waited months for. The ombudsman asked, "Mr. Cross, given the extent of violations, what relief are you seeking?" I took a breath, steady and clear. "Immediate audit, removal of officers found complicit in structural reforms, term limits, open voting records, and public access to all budgets. I'm not asking for damages, just transparency." The silence that followed was thick enough to stand on. Even the lawyer didn't interrupt. The ombudsman nodded slowly. "We'll deliberate," he said. "In the meantime, the HOA's authority over community enforcement is hereby suspended pending review." The room erupted, some cheers, some disbelief, some tears. Ruth squeezed my arm, whispering, "You did it." "Not yet," I said. "Wait for the ruling." Outside, cameras waited. The reporter fired off questions as flashes popped. I didn't say much, just held up one page of the county document and said, "Sometimes the loudest weapon is ink." By evening, the online post went live. Headline: "Engineers Paper Trail Halts HOA Authority Pending State Review." The neighborhood Facebook group locked itself down within hours. Tom's lawyer issued a statement about procedural misunderstandings, but the damage was done. Still, I knew there was one more reversal left. The kind Colleen liked to call the cleanup clause, and it was coming sooner than anyone expected. The ruling came on a Thursday morning, sealed in a white envelope hand-delivered by a county courier. I opened at the kitchen table, the paper smelling faintly of toner and justice. The ombudsman's letter was concise. Findings: HOA Maple Lake bore engaged in procedural misconduct, selective enforcement, and improper delegation of authority. Recommendations: immediate reform charter, election oversight, and restitution of all unlawfully assessed fines. Tom and 2 other officers were officially removed pending compliance audits. The rest had 30 days to submit to new transparency bylaws or face receivership. The HOA had fallen. Colleen called an hour later, voice brighter than I'd ever heard it. "Congratulations, Daniel. That's a full consent decree. They'll sign to avoid court. What happens next? They'll offer a deal. That's where you decide what this all means." By noon, the board's lawyer requested a settlement meeting. I agreed on my terms. Open room, recorded, community witnesses present. Ruth brought cookies for the crowd, because that's how justice should smell: sweet, simple, and neighborly. Tom sat across from me, hands folded, humility forced. "We're prepared to accept reforms," he said, reading from a prepared statement. "Term limits, open records, third-party audits, rollback of fines. Add a transparency charter," I interrupted. "Every vote public, every budget online." He hesitated. "That's digressive." "So was impersonating police," I said. The crowd murmured approval. He nodded, defeated. That was reversal number 2, the reform deal. The paperwork exchanged hands like peace treaties, signatures neat but shaky. Colleen read each clause aloud, her tone crisp and deliberate. When the last signature hit the page, a quiet cheer rippled through the room. Ruth whispered, "You did it. You really did." I looked at her and said, "No, we did." In that moment, the weight I'd carried for months finally lifted. It wasn't vengeance. It was restoration. The sound of neighbors talking again, the feel of normal air returning to the street, the sight of kids' bikes back on the sidewalks. That's what justice should look like. If you believe I fought the right way and this is how it should end, say a few words in the comments for your friend. Subscribe so the next story reaches you first. And share this one. Someone out there might need to know that paper still beats power when wielded right. 2 weeks later, a notice appeared on every mailbox. Community Reform Charter ratified, effective immediately. It listed new term limits, fee transparency, and an independent ethics committee. HOA Max had found its next story, but mine was done. Ruth's laugh echoed across her porch again. Elias retired his clipboard for good, saying he'd rather garden now that he could do it without a violation slip. Colleen sent me a text with one word: precedent. The local paper printed a follow-up. Maple Lake HOA enacts transparency charter following state intervention. The photo showed me handing over the signed charter, sunlight catching the metallic county seal. I still keep the binder, the paper arc, on my shelf. Its metal rings click when I open it, like the echo of a lock and done. Sometimes, late at night, I flip to the first page, the fence photo that started it all, and remind myself why we fight. Not for revenge, for records, for truth, for the quiet that follows when bullies finally hear silence louder than their own threats. Knowledge nugget, final in governance, HOA or higher, sunlight isn't optional. It's statute, ethics, and air combined. And as the sunset hit the lake that evening, I could see the reflection of the old HOA sign across the water, letters fading but still standing. Proof that power can crumble, yet community endures. The story closed with a sound I'd missed for months, the steady hiss of sprinklers returning to life, running on permission this time, not intimidation.